To be a Baha'i simply means to love all the world, to love humanity and try to serve it, to work for universal peace and universal brotherhood. Now the new age is here and creation is reborn. Humanity hath taken on new life. The autumn hath gone by, and the reviving spring is here. All things are now made new. Arts and industries have been reborn. There are new discoveries in science, and there are new inventors. Even the details of human affairs, such as dress and personal effects, even weapons, all these have likewise been renewed. The laws and procedures of every government have been revised. Renewal is the order of the day. And all this newness hath its source in the fresh outpourings of wondrous grace and favor from the Lord of the kingdom, which have renewed the world. The people, therefore, must be set completely free from their old patterns of thought, that all their attention may be focused upon these new principles, for these are the light of this time and the very spirit of this age. Abdul-Baha.
So today our speaker is Dr. Jena Khodadad, and her topic is the passing of Abdul-Baha, his assurance that his presence will be with us always. The passing of Abdul-Baha, known as the Ascension of Abdul-Baha, is commemorated throughout the Baha'i worldwide community. Abdul-Baha is one of the three central figures in the Baha'i Faith. This presentation talks about some of his outstanding achievements of the life of Abdul-Baha, his passing, known as his Ascension, and his assurance, whether or not I be on earth, my presence will be with you always. Jena Khadem Khodadad is a fourth-generation Iranian Baha'i. The major part of her life was in the United States of America, where she received her doctorate degree and pursued her academic career. Jena is a scientist, cellular and molecular biologist. Aside from her scientific research and publications, she's deeply interested in themes centered on Baha'i history, the Baha'i worldview, and the fundamental principles of the Baha'i Faith. In this respect, among her latest publications is a book, Scientific Principles at Work in the Worldwide Advancement of the Baha'i Faith, which is available through Ronald Publishers. So with that, I'll hand it off to Dr. Khodadad.
Thank you very much for that introduction. This presentation is on the passing of Abdul-Baha, one of the three central figures in the Baha'i Faith. At this outset, few introductory words are in order for those who may not be familiar with the Baha'i Faith, the most recent of the world's universal religions. Among the fundamental principles of Baha'i Faith are independent investigation of truth, harmony of science and religion, elimination of all prejudices, equality of women and men, the oneness of the human race, the recognition of the validity of all the major religions of the world, and the dynamic, progressive interrelationship among them. The principles and teachings of Baha'i Faith inspire and guide this global age. The Baha'i Faith is widely spread across this entire planet, from pole to pole and in all corners of the world, including within its fold diverse races, religions, nationalities, and ethnicities. It is a veritable microcosm of humanity. It is dedicated to the principle of the oneness of humankind. Thus, it is ideally suited for bringing about the unification and solidarity of the races, ethnicities, religions, and nations across this planet. November 28 marks the Ascension of Abdul-Baha. The passing of Abdul-Baha is often referred to as the Ascension of Abdul-Baha. This does not mean that the physical body of Abdul-Baha resurrected to higher realms. It does, however, convey that the personage of Abdul-Baha never dies. His teachings, his example are ever present and enduring. His presence is ever with us. The Ascension, the passing of Abdul-Baha, closed the last chapter of the heroic age and inaugurated the formative age of the Baha'i Faith, to advance in time toward the golden age of the Baha'i dispensation. This presentation will be accompanied throughout with PowerPoint slides. These add clarity and, most importantly, facilitate inclusion of the sources of references and citations used throughout this talk. Abdul-Baha, the center of the covenant of Baha'u'llah. The example of Abdul-Baha extends far beyond the Baha'i community to all of whatever race, religions, or class of society they may be. Abdul-Baha has a unique station that extends beyond the Baha'i community to the world community, to all humanity for all times. He was an ardent force in promulgation of universal peace. He was a champion at the vanguard of racial harmony, the equality of women and men, the rights of the poor and the dispossessed, and the comforter of the sick and the needy. Through his life, through his talks and examples, he provided lessons to be emulated toward personal and societal transformation. Abdul-Baha is the fulfillment of the longed-for ideal of a perfect human, of a perfect man. The guardian of the Baha'i Faith, Shobia Fetli writes, Abdul-Baha was the incarnation of every Baha'i virtue and the embodiment of every Baha'i ideal. The station of Abdul-Baha will ever remain a mystery. May our sense of immense loss over his passing find consolation, solace, and comfort through his everlasting words of assurance, whether or not I be on earth, my presence will be with you always. Abdul-Baha implores us to fulfill his wishes. In the time allotted to this presentation, I wish to memorialize the three most outstanding acts, achievements of the ministry of Abdul-Baha. That is the laying to rest the sacred remains of the Bab, the establishment of the Baha'i Faith in the Western Hemisphere, and his mandate, the tablets of the divine plan, the charter for the worldwide growth and advancement of the Baha'i Faith. Abdul-Baha, the sheltering branch. My tongue falters in offering a befitting homage to Abdul-Baha, the appointed successor to Baha'u'llah, the manifestation. His appointment as the center of the covenant was 9 days after the passing, that is the ascension of Baha'u'llah, when the will and testament of Baha'u'llah was unsealed. Though we cannot fathom that mystery, we can reflect on the all-encompassing love, nurturing, and sheltering of Abdul-Baha. Abdul-Baha holds the title branch, the branch, a title glorified in the Old Testament. Sheltering was the essence of his life and ministry. He was a refuge to the downtrodden, a comforter to the sick and the grieved, the father of the orphan, the nurturer of Baha'i administration, and a shelter to all. Through his successorship to Baha'u'llah, mankind was favored with continued downpouring of divine grace. The Book of My Covenant was the most great tablet of Baha'u'llah. It was written in Baha'u'llah's handwriting and unsealed on the 9th day after his ascension. The Book of My Covenant is a document organically linked to Baha'u'llah and infused with undisputable authority, wherein Baha'u'llah designated Abdul-Baha, the most great branch, as the center of his covenant, to whom all shall turn, the one whom God had purposed, who had branched from this pre-existent truth. Humanity has been graced with 48 years of continuous revelation through the twin manifestations, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, from 1844 to 1892, thus leaving a treasury of sacred writings whose scope, authority, and authenticity will remain for all times unequivocal, beyond dispute, a thing unprecedented in any past dispensation. Divine guidance continued through the person of Abdul-Baha. Abdul-Baha bears the titles, the master, the center of the covenant of Baha'u'llah, the mystery of God, Sirrullah, the perfect exemplar, the interpreter of his holy writ, the limb of the law of God, he who had branched from this ancient root, the most great branch, the most mighty branch, the branch of holiness, the shelter for all mankind. Several biblical prophecies refer to the branch. The branch from the divine lottery. The divine lottery is in reference to Jesse, the father of King David. Baha'u'llah's lineage is derived from that root. Abdul-Baha is the fulfillment of these prophecies. Abdul-Baha as the most great branch, the most mighty branch, the branch of holiness. Isaiah 4:2 foretells the appearance of the exalted branch of the Lord. In that day shall the branch of the Lord be beautiful and glorious. And then again, Isaiah 11:1. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of its roots. Zechariah. Behold the man whose name is the branch, and he shall grow out of his place, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. Herein reference is made to the laying to rest the sacred remains of the Bab by the man whose name is the branch, Abdul-Baha. And then again, few verses down, Zechariah continues, and they that are far off shall come and build in the temple of the Lord. These two verses from Zechariah relate to the interment in the heart of Mount Carmel by Abdul-Baha, the branch of the sacred remains of the Bab, and that many far off from across the world took part in the construction and the building of the temple of the Lord. The Lord, the Bab, known to us as the exalted Lord, Rabbi A'la. The guardian of Baha'i Faith, Shoghi Effendi, affirms that the laying to rest the sacred remains of the Bab ranks as one of the most outstanding acts of the ministry of Abdul-Baha. One of the most outstanding acts of the ministry of Abdul-Baha. It ranks as one of the outstanding events in the first Baha'i century. I wish to offer a brief overview of the transfer of the sacred remains of the Bab from the moat outside the city of Tabriz to its final resting place in the heart of Mount Carmel, the mountain of God. After the exalted Bab was martyred on July 9, 1850, the mangled bodies of the Bab and his fellow martyr, Mirza Muhammad Ali, known as Anis, were thrown on the edge of the moat outside the city of Tabriz. The remains were removed in the middle of the second night following their execution from the edge of the moat outside the city of Tabriz, where they had been cast. They were transferred to a silk factory owned by one of the believers of Milan. The next day, they were laid in a wooden casket and carried thence to a safe place. Subsequently, according to instructions of Baha'u'llah in 1850, the sacred remains were transported to various sites in Tehran. And next, according to Baha'u'llah's instruction from Edirne in 1868, the sacred remains were transported to a number of sites and cities, among them Qom, Kashan, Isfahan, and Kermanshah. In 1899, under the direction of Abdul-Baha, now almost after 49 years, the sacred remains were transferred from Kermanshah to Baghdad, onto Damascus, onto Beirut, and onto Akka, arriving in Akka on January 31, 1899. Interment took place in the heart of Mount Carmel, in Haifa, on March 21, 1909, by the blessed hands of Abdul-Baha. That scene is poignantly described by the appointed guardian of the Baha'i Faith, Shoghi Effendi, in God Passes By, on page 276. When all was finished and the earthly remains of the martyr prophet of Shiraz were at long last safely deposited for their everlasting rest in the bosom of God's holy mountain, Abdul-Baha, who had cast aside his turban, removed his shoes and thrown off his cloak, bent low over the still open sarcophagus, his silver hair waving about his head, and his face transfigured and luminous, rested his forehead on the border of the wooden casket, and sobbing aloud, wept with such weeping that all those who were present wept with him. That night, he could not sleep, so overwhelmed was he with emotion. Later, in a tablet, Abdul-Baha announced that most joyous tidings to the Baha'i world. The holy, the luminous body of the Bab, after having for 60 years been transferred from place to place, has been ceremoniously deposited on the day of Nowruz within the sacred casket in the exalted shrine on Mount Carmel. With this momentous mission fulfilled, Abdul-Baha, at an advanced age of 67, arose with sublime courage, confidence, and resolution to set out for 3 years of travel to the West, to Europe and North America, bringing about a turning point of utmost significance, lending an extraordinary impetus to the international expansion of Baha'i Faith. Toward the establishment of Baha'i Faith in the Western Hemisphere. When Abdul-Baha set out for the West, it was less than 2 years before the outbreak of the First World War. It was a perilous juncture in history. Fundamental values of the individual, their God, religion, history, and civilization were eroded and being questioned. The establishment of the Baha'i Faith in North America. This American nation had been addressed by Baha'u'llah in the most holy book as the Great Republic of the West. It was indeed a critical point in history when Abdul-Baha set out for the West. It was less than 2 years before the outbreak of World War I. Long-standing values were being eroded. The value of the individual, belief in God, God is dead, was proclaimed by Friedrich Nietzsche. Religion, opium of masses, pure fiction, was promoted by Karl Marx. Civilization was viewed only material with no spiritual component. And history, there was a dismal view of history, of the process, the impetus, and the outcome of history. It was at such times that Abdul-Baha set out for the West. And for America, Abdul-Baha sailed from Alexandria on March 25, 1912, toward North America on SS Cedric via Naples, arriving in New York on April 11, 1912. The first day of Abdul-Baha in New York, his address to the assembled friends. This long journey will prove how great is my love for you. There were many troubles and vicissitudes, but in the thought of meeting with you, all these things vanished and were forgotten. Abdul-Baha traveled extensively through North America, in Montreal and then United States. He traveled from East Coast toward West Coast, through Northeast, Central, Midwest, Southwest, West, and back to the East Coast, as indicated on this schematic map of the region. For 139 days from coast to coast, following the course of his travels, leaves one astonished. He traveled extensively through the North American continent under strenuous conditions, taking this path shown by the red line and the arrows from the East Coast to the West Coast, and back shown by green arrows and green line back to the East Coast, visiting numerous cities and meeting with notable individuals. When in California, he traveled from San Francisco to Los Angeles for the sole purpose of paying his respect to the grave of Thornton Chase, the very first American Baha'i, and back to San Francisco, and from there back to East Coast. Throughout these travels, he had addressed universities, peace societies, congregations, met secretaries of state, congressmen, ambassadors, distinguished rabbis and churchmen. Other people of eminence attained his presence, among them Alexander Graham Bell, Mrs. William Jennings Bryan, Rabindranath Tagore, Andrew Carnegie, Mr. Roosevelt, Admiral Perry, and others. His talks and example fill the pages of numerous published volumes. In his travels, through his examples, talks, and discourse at various settings, churches, universities, and before societies, he provided lessons and insights that inspired and transformed many. After 239 days, Abdul-Baha departed from the North American continent. On December 5, 1912, leaving many forlorn but transformed. On his departure in December 5, 1912, he offered these parting words on steamship Celtic. This is my last interview with you, and now I'm on this ship to sail away. My last exhortation to you is this: exert yourselves with your heart and soul, so that perchance through your efforts the light of universal peace may shine, and the darkness of estrangement and enmity be dispelled from amongst men. Unto this I call you. The last tablet revealed for the Baha'is of America. Be assured that the confirmation of the Abha kingdom will continually reach you. Through the power of the divine springtime, the downpour of the celestial clouds, and the heat of the sun of reality, the tree of life is just beginning to grow. Before long, it will produce buds, bring forth leaves and fruits, and cast its shade over the east and the west. This tree of life is the book of the covenant. Abdul-Baha departed from the North American continent, leaving behind many transformed. Never would they ever be the same. Never could they ever be the same. Departure of Abdul-Baha from New York toward Europe was on December 5, 1912, on steamship Celtic, arriving in Liverpool on December 13, 1912. After 6 months of travel in Europe, Abdul-Baha returned to Egypt and from there to Haifa. On June 12, 1913, after 6 months, returned to Haifa on December 5, 1913. The First World War broke out on July 28, 1914. The guidance of Abdul-Baha continued through the tablets of the Divine Plan in 1916 and 1917. These were 14 letters addressed to the North American Baha'is in 1916 and 1917. That is, to the believers in the northeastern, southern, central, and western states of the United States, and also to Canada. These letters were written on postcards, and some of them were sent during the war years. The tablets of the Divine Plan formed the charter for the growth and advancement of the Baha'i Faith. The language of these letters was poetic, ennobling, encouraging, and empowering. The language was ennobling. Baha'is were called as apostles of Baha'u'llah and were asked to fulfill their noble potential. They were called Israfil of life. According to Islamic tradition, Israfil is the beautiful angel of music, singing praises to God in 1,000 different languages and injecting life in the host of angels. Israfil is the angel responsible for signaling the coming of the judgment day by blowing a trumpet and sending out a blast of truth. Believers were called the heavenly army, likening each one as unto a regiment. Thus they were empowered and assured of ultimate victory. At the close of his strenuous Western tours, which had called forth the last ounce of his ebbing strength, Abdul-Baha intimated his imminent passing. I shall be no longer with you. Friends, the time is coming when I shall be no longer with you. I have done all that could be done. I have served the cause of Baha'u'llah to the utmost of my ability. I have labored night and day all the years of my life. Oh, how I long to see the believers shouldering the responsibilities of the cause. My days are numbered, and save this, there remains none other joy for me. He appealed to them with his urgent and poignant words. I am waiting. I am patiently waiting. I am straining my ears toward the east, toward the west, toward the north, and toward the south. Perchance I might hear the songs of love and good fellowship raised from the meetings of the believers. My days are numbered, and save this, there is no joy left for me. The ardent plea of Abdul-Baha continues ever more fervently. I'm waiting. I am patiently waiting. Ah, me, I am waiting, waiting to hear the glad news that the believers are the embodiments of sincerity and loyalty, that they are the incarnation of love and amity, and the visible symbols of unity and concord. Will they not rejoice my heart? Will they not satisfy my cravings? Will they not comply with my requests? Will they not fulfill my anticipations? Will they not answer my call? The great work of Abdul-Baha had ended. His passing was imminent. O Lord, my Lord, hasten my ascension unto thy sublime threshold, and my arrival at the door of thy grace, beneath the shadow of thy most great mercy. Abdul-Baha passed in the early hours of November 28, 1921, at 1:30 in the morning. The news of the passing of Abdul-Baha came as a thunderbolt. So sudden, so unexpected, it spread like wildfire throughout the town and was flashed instantly over the wires to distant parts of the globe, stunning with grief the community of the followers of Baha'u'llah in East and West. Messages from far and near, from high and low alike, through cablegrams and letters poured in from many eminent individuals, conveying expressions of praise, of devotion, of anguish, and of sympathy. Among them, the British Secretary of State for the Colonies, Mr. Winston Churchill, telegraphed immediately to the High Commissioner for Palestine, Sir Herbert Samuel, instructing him to convey to the Baha'i community, on behalf of His Majesty's government, their sympathy and condolence. Lycon Allenby, the High Commissioner of Egypt, wired the High Commissioner for Palestine, asking him to convey to the relatives of the late Sir Abdul-Baha Abbas Effendi and to the Baha'i community his sincere sympathy in the loss of their revered leader. The Council of Ministers in Baghdad instructed the Prime Minister Sayyid Abdul Rahman to extend their sympathy to the family of His Holiness Abdul-Baha in their bereavement. A distinguished figure in the academic life of the University of Oxford wrote on behalf of himself and his wife, the passing beyond the veil into fuller life must be especially wonderful and blessed for one who has always fixed his thoughts on high. General Sir Arthur Money, former chief administrator of Palestine, wrote expressing his sadness, his profound respect, and his admiration for him, as well as his sympathy in the loss which his family had sustained. The funeral procession started at 9 in the morning on November 29 from the house of Abdul-Baha. The air was rent with weeping of family and friends. They all advanced toward the casket and kissed with flowing tears the shawl laid over the casket. The funeral then proceeded with solemnity and splendor. Sir Herbert Samuel, the High Commissioner of Palestine, accompanied by high officials, arrived in a special train starting from Jerusalem at midnight in order to attend the funeral in time. No less than 10,000 participated, representing every class, religion, and race in that country. A great throng had gathered together sorrowing for his death, but rejoicing also for his life. Men of all creeds and societies, as well as the great men of the city, were present and followed the procession. The funeral, as described in an Arabic paper at Haifa, was miraculous and beyond description. The people of Haifa attended the funeral, and all were bowed in grief and wept all the way from his house to the tomb on Mount Carmel. The coffin containing the remains of Abdul-Baha was borne to its last resting place on the shoulders of his loved ones. The funeral cortege was led by the city constabulary force, acting as a guard of honor, behind which followed in order the Boy Scouts of the Muslim and Christian communities, holding aloft their banner, a company of Muslim choristers chanting their verses from the Quran, the chiefs of the Muslim community headed by the Mufti, and a number of Christian priests, Latin, Greek, and Anglican. Behind the coffin walked the members of his family. The British High Commissioner, Sir Herbert Samuel, the Governor of Jerusalem, Sir Ronald Storrs, the Governor of Phoenicia, Sir Stuart Symes, officials of the government, consuls of various countries resident in Haifa, notables of Palestine, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, and Druze, Egyptians, Greeks, Turks, Arabs, Kurds, Europeans, and Americans, men, women, and children. After walking for 1 hour and 25 minutes, the procession, the long train of mourners, amid the sobs and moans of many a grief-stricken heart, wended its slow way up the slopes of Mount Carmel to the mausoleum of the Bab, close to the eastern entrance of the shrine of the Bab, was placed upon a plain table before the tomb of the Bab. In the presence of that vast concourse, until the rest of the procession reached that place, 9 speakers representing the Muslim, the Jewish, and Christian faiths, and also the Mufti of Haifa, spoke spontaneously, declaring his greatness and comparing it with the prophets of the past, testifying to the sorrow and the great loss which they felt in his passing. Several funeral orations were delivered. These concluded, the High Commissioner drew close to the casket and with bowed head, fronting the shrine, paid his last homage of farewell to Abdul-Baha. The other officials of the government followed his example. The coffin was then removed to one of the chambers of the shrine, and there lowered sadly and reverently to his last resting place in a vault adjoining that in which were laid the remains of the Bab. The burial took place on Tuesday, 29 November 1921. During the week following his passing, from 50 to 100 of the poor of Haifa were daily fed at his house, whilst on the 7th day, corn was distributed in his memory to about 1,000 of them, irrespective of creed or race. On the 40th day, an impressive memorial feast was held in his memory, to which over 600 of the people of Haifa, Akka, and the surrounding parts of Palestine and Syria, including officials and notables of various religions and races, were invited. More than 100 of the poor were also fed on that day. Thus was brought to a close the earthly ministry of Abdul-Baha, the perfect exemplar. The ministry of Abdul-Baha marks the final stage in the apostolic, the heroic, and the most glorious age of the dispensation of Baha'u'llah. Thus was brought to a close the ministry of one who was the incarnation by virtue of the rank bestowed upon him by his father, on an institution that has no parallel in the entire field of religious history, a ministry that marks the final stage to repeat in the apostolic, the heroic, and most glorious stage of the dispensation of Baha'u'llah. The Baha'i Faith is dedicated to constructing a befitting shrine to Abdul-Baha. The Universal House of Justice, the supreme governing body of the Baha'i Faith, states that the structure envisaged in its design seeks to honor Abdul-Baha's unique position and to reflect at once his humility. It seeks to manifest Abdul-Baha's selflessness, wisdom, openness, acceptance, and kindness toward all people, and his love for garden and nature. The design of the shrine of Abdul-Baha reflects Abdul-Baha's selflessness. Make me a dust in the pathway of thy loved ones. Abdul-Baha had expressed his wish where he wanted to be buried. He had said to an early believer that if something should happen to him and he should pass away, he wanted to be buried under the sands between Haifa and Akka, which he described as the pathway trodden by the loved ones and the pilgrims. He expressed wishes inspire the design of his shrine. Now I wish to share some words excerpted from a provisional translation of a letter of the beloved guardian Shobi Effendi to the Baha'is of the East, wherein he evokes the sentiments, wishes, and counsels of Abdul-Baha, assuring us of his protection and that he is ever with us. Oh, my beloved ones, be not grieved nor dejected. Be not silent. Let not anything dismay or frustrate you. I am with you. I am shielding you within the stronghold of my protection and sheltering you in the sanctuary of my care. I will at all times grant you fresh confirmation and assistance. It continues. Be not remorseful on account of my departure, and let not the things of this life, nor the changes and chances of these days disturb or alarm you. Take heed lest the trials and afflictions of this contingent world cause you to waver in the cause of God. Inasmuch as ye are the host of the Almighty, ye are the concourse of the people of Baha, who will be raised up from amidst this fierce tempest of tribulation and will become distinguished among the people of the world for your virtue of enduring meekness and inexhaustible and inflexible constancy, and will be adorned with the adornment of noble character, of detachment, and of upright conduct. And it continues. Aid ye the cause of God, so that you may gradually lead this gloomy, this harassed and agitated world to the summit of eternal glory, and may bring it under the shadow of the cause of God, neath the sheltering shade of this tabernacle of divine salvation. And now direct words of assurance from Abdul-Baha, that his presence will always be with us. Remember, whether or not I be on earth, my presence will be with you always. Regard not the person of Abdul-Baha. At this point, attention on the tablet of visitation of Abdul-Baha. Now only a small selection from it. O God, my God, lowly and tearful, I raise my suppliant hands to thee and cover my face in the dust of that threshold of thine, exalted above the knowledge of the learned and the praise of all that glorify thee. Graciously look upon thy servant, humble and lowly at thy door, with the glances of the eye of thy mercy, and immerse him in the ocean of thine eternal grace. Abdul-Baha left us with his urgent words, his plea. I am waiting. I am patiently waiting. Oh, me. I am waiting to hear the glad news that the believers are the embodiment of sincerity and loyalty, that they are the incarnation of love and amity, and the visible symbols of unity and concord. Will they not rejoice my heart? Will they not satisfy my cravings? Will they not comply with my request? Will they not fulfill my anticipations? Will they not answer my call? And now I want to express my appreciation to the viewers of this presentation, which is offered in commemoration of the passing of Abdul-Baha. It is only an attempt to bring forth some of the salient points on Abdul-Baha, one who never dies. He assured us that his presence will ever remain with us, whether or not I be on earth, my presence will be with you always.
Thank you so much. I'm just gonna stop the screen. There we go. Thank you so much for that talk. That was really great, especially a few days before the Ascension of Abdul-Baha. So this was a nice commemoration of that. Thank you. If we have any questions, people can put it in the chat. The first question is, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation, so timely as we are close to the Day of the Covenant and the passing of Abdul-Baha. Why do we celebrate the Day of the Covenant in the Baha'i communities all over the world?
It was 2 days before the Ascension of Abdul-Baha. And when Abdul-Baha was asked when to honor him, he did not, this is what I understand, and I hope my understanding is correct, because often we talk about the birth of Abdul-Baha on the very same date of the declaration of the Baha. When he wanted, in his humility, he asked that a day be for remembering him, and that was on the 26th of November, which was 2 days before his ascension. This is my understanding. The background story of Palestine had famine. There was a lot of hardship, and Abdul-Baha played a very important role in the agriculture, in the development of crop, so that the population could be saved from starvation. And as was already mentioned, after his ascension, that was also an important focus in remembering Abdul-Baha's passing by feeding large numbers. The role Abdul-Baha played during that period was very much significant for the city of Haifa, for Palestine, in saving the population from starvation.
Thank you for the warm and touching presentation. Do we know why Abdul-Baha was buried in the Shrine of the Bab?
Well, that's a wonderful question. That was a decision that was made by the beloved guardian. And there are references actually to the fact that Elijah would be returned to the Holy Land. And in some respects, perhaps we can say that the Bab, being the forerunner of Baha'u'llah, was in a way the herald as well as an independent manifestation, a herald to Baha'u'llah, as Elijah was. And actually the burial is very close to the cave of Elijah. I don't have any further explanation aside from these two.
The next question is, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Can you please say a bit more about the Master being with us at all times?
Well, he has assured us. So I have been repeating this statement of his, whether or not I be on earth, my presence will be with you always. He has made that statement in numerous documents, assuring us that his presence will be there to guide us, to inspire us. And I think just getting oneself in that state of mind that Abdul-Baha is ever present with us, that he has never left us, is a very powerful.
Is it true that some of the workers on the shrine of Abdul-Baha had relatives that were fed by Abdul-Baha?
Most with high probability. I don't know it specifically, but because Abdul-Baha played such a role in averting famine, it is highly likely.
Please elaborate on how we can present the life and legacy of Abdul-Baha in our teaching, especially the promise to be with us always.
Well, by going to his acts, to his ministry, to his writings, to his books, to his advice, to his clarification of many, many passages in the Baha'i writings, and that he actually, after the revelation by the Bab and Baha'u'llah came to its end, Abdul-Baha carried us through the next stage, through his wisdom, his writings, his advice, and his counsel, and his clarification. So the station of Abdul-Baha is very unique. In no other dispensation, in no other revelation, in no other religion, am I aware that there was a figure such as Abdul-Baha, who after the passing of the founder of that dispensation would take on the role of maintaining the continuity and maintaining the unity of the believers, and then inspiring them further with his wisdom.
What is the best source or sources about the life of Abdul-Baha and stories about his life?
Well, there's numerous books that are written. There are quite a few books. There's a whole series that were written by various authors. There's a whole list of them.
Abdul-Baha in our midst.
Abdul-Baha in our midst is one of them, but then there are quite a few others. There are. If I knew that question would be asked, I would have prepared the whole list and read them on to you, on, and there are volumes that are written by numerous authors, a whole series of Abdul-Baha in America that's written by numerous authors.
I think there's one by Robert Stockman.
Oh, absolutely. Robert Stockman, you came up with the name. He has written 3 volumes on Abdul-Baha. 3 or 4, I think, 3 volumes on Abdul-Baha. And he wrote in the English language, but there are also many books written about Abdul-Baha in the Persian language, which are original Persian language, not a translation of English books, but written by Baha'i authors in the Persian language. There's a whole stack of them.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation, thanks. Do we have any info of how the blessed remains of the Bab and Anis were preserved after taken from the moat?
Well, the information we have that on the second night, they were taken from the moat outside the city of Tabriz and wrapped in cloth and placed in a wooden casket. And there was a believer in Milan. He played an important role in that. And after that, you had a sequence of how these were transported from place to place. I'm not aware that there was any further preservation of the bodies after that, until they arrived in Akka. And that was over the course of 60 years after the martyrdom of the Bab. Then they were entombed in the heart of Haifa, Mount Carmel in Haifa.
Is it correct that all of Abdul-Baha's funeral pictures were taken by Curtis Kelsey while he was serving at the Holy Land?
I don't know. I know he played an important role, but I'm not sure that he was the sole individual who was taking the pictures.
Could you please say something about Abdul-Baha and the Titanic?
Oh, yes, yes. Abdul-Baha, I think almost a day after or so, maybe at the same time when Abdul-Baha arrived in America, that's when the news came that the Titanic had sunk, because the Titanic set out about the same time when Abdul-Baha boarded the ship. First, he was booked on the Titanic. And then I think the plans changed and he came on a different line, not the Titanic. So it was sunk. So the news was that Titanic had sunk as a result of collision with an iceberg. It was an exact time, almost an exact time.
Could you talk about Abdul-Baha promoting race unity when in North America?
Oh, yes. I mean, that is a whole presentation by itself, how he promoted the race unity, his statements about racial harmony, and his statements about the importance of overcoming this racial bias in the United States. Again, volumes can be written about this, and hours of discussion can be offered on this theme. So Louis Gregory's wedding, mediated by Abdul-Baha, his marriage.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions I see. So we can end here. Thank you so much again, Dr. Khodadad, for your talk.
My pleasure.
So our speaker next week will be Peter Goddard, and his topic is exploring adolescent pathways to spiritual growth. So again, these talks are every Saturday at noon Eastern time, and I put the link to our contact form on our YouTube channel in the chat if you're not already subscribed. We'll end with a Baha'i song about Abdul-Baha today.
The photograph I see comes alive so easily and tells me of a life that was so pure.
He would never turn away from anyone, and the love in his eyes is so real.
He suffered all his life to show us how to be free. He could always love his enemy.
And through the worst of trials, he could always smile and lift the heart of every friend up so high. Abdul-Baha was his name, and Abdul-Baha was his life.
Abdul-Baha was his aim, his whole life a sacrifice. Abdul-Baha, Abdul-Baha. He could take the hand of a sad and lonely man and wash away his fear for a while.
He could understand the secrets we defend,
And make it feel that living was worthwhile.
Abdul-Baha was his name, and Abdul-Baha
Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Have a great week. Bye.